Hey everyone, so glad to have you here. We're a little bit awed and humbled by how many of you were able to share your time with us today, and we hope to give you something that will really be worth your time learning today how our food pantry has changed and what's happening next. We're going to talk about how you've helped us through unexpected challenges during the pandemic, and even as we come out of the pandemic, what the needs are in our community. We'll share a little bit of history, and we're going to talk about what's coming in the future. I'm Julie Bennett. I'm the CEO and Executive Director for the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. I've been with the Society for about 2.5 years now as the CEO since October 1st. It's such a privilege to be here in this role and to be here with you today. And it's such a privilege to introduce you to Chris Kane, who is our Senior Director of Client Services. Chris, what about you?
Thanks, Julie. My name is Chris Kane. I am the Senior Director of Client Services here at St. Vincent de Paul. I've been with St. Vincent de Paul for 27.5 years, and I currently manage the programs that we run both out of this building here on Fish Hatchery Road and also the housing programs as well.
So thanks, Chris. We'll get started with the presentation shortly, but just a couple of how-tos. You'll see a place to add questions in the chat or add comments in the chat. Please feel free to do so. We will get to questions in the second half of the presentation, and we'll try to answer as many of those as you can. We're also recording the webinar, so if you have to bug out a little bit early, you'll be able to finish the rest of it later or share with those that you think might be interested. Now, let's get into what we're here to talk about today. Chris, will you start with the history of the St. Vincent de Paul Food Pantry?
You bet, Julie. So I started with St. Vincent de Paul in 1995. I was working in our food pantry on the corner of Williamson and Baldwin. It was 800 square feet. We were at that point like serving about 40 or so families every day. And in the kind of late 2000s, did we as a community start thinking about a better way to serve folks that gave them more choice in the food that they were selecting, and just a little bit more dignified way to go about that. And so in 2010, we opened a client choice food pantry here on the south side of Madison on Coleman Street. While we, actually 2005, I'm sorry, while we started our capital campaign to build this building that we're in now. And this building opened in 2010. We've continued to operate that client choice food pantry through the years without much change, really. We had volunteers that would take the customers through the food pantry with a number of points to spend, and they could, shop for their families' needs, wants, and hopefully there would be less waste involved in the fact that people are just taking, what their family will need. So about 2019, that is the year, that was the last year, really full year that we operated inside in the client choice model. And we served about 15 to 1,700 families per month that year. And really, you could go back all the way probably to the recession around 2010 to 2012. And our numbers would be fairly consistent. You can see on the graph there, the blue line represents 2019, the last full year before the pandemic started. And it was just very consistent. There was not a lot of change from month to month. And we probably would have gone on like that, indefinitely if it weren't for the pandemic starting in March of 2020. So that the pandemic obviously necessitated a lot of change. Number one being having to operate contactless. So in March of 2020, you can see the red line on the graph is 2020, and we spiked right away in March when we went to the outdoor drive-through model, upwards of 2,000 families in a month. And we had some kind of peaks and valleys that first year of how the usage was until October of 2020 really was the time that the virus itself really impacted us locally in Madison and Dane County, and usage really went up then as folks started missing work, missing those paychecks, and really started turning to food pantries more often. And that kind of continued through the end of the year until the election in the fall of 2020. And under the new administration beginning in 2021, you can see on the graph, the yellow line represents 2021. And in that year, there were a lot more safeguards put in place for folks to help them with their food and with their rent and utilities, moratoriums in place. But the biggest thing actually was the child tax credit. So the child tax credit was something normally that folks with children that met the qualifications would get a refund at the end of the tax year after they filed taxes. But what happened in 2021 is they started putting that refund right into people's pockets as they needed the cash. And what it did, you can see by that yellow line, is really cut down on the number of people needing to use a food pantry. So it got down to, it looks like in May of 2021, just barely over 1,000 families using the food pantry that month. That's way below where we had been normally, and it was certainly about half of some of the months that we saw just the year prior. So that alone really helped keep people out of food pantries. That ended in January of 2022. And so you can see the green line on the graph represents 2022. And we kind of started out from the same place that we left off, but it continued to grow through the spring and into the summer, and way more even during the fall and winter. And so as that child tax credit ended, and you saw, like, a lot of us experienced the cost of food going up, the price of gas going up, again, a lot of safety nets being taken away, and the food pantry usage just really took off, to the point of seeing 2,500 plus families by December of 2022. We've recently been able to add the first quarter of 2023, the orange line, and you can see that does not start off where all of the other years started off. That starts off where the green line left off, and at about 2,500 families. And in March, last month of 2023, we actually served over 2,800 households, which is, by far the largest we've ever seen. So it's been a really roller coaster ride, but this is kind of where we're sitting right now.
Thanks, Chris. These are hard numbers to look at. And at the same time, I really want you to know, the folks who are watching with us today, it is the support of a generous community that has allowed us to continue to meet these needs. When we do our budget every year, and we're doing that about June, you look at that sort of rising but not super fast rising line, that green line, and that was where we were doing our planning, was that we were going to be prepared to serve 1,800 or maybe 2,000 visits a month. And then all of a sudden by September, we're regularly topping 2,000 families each month, and that's continuing to grow. It's because of your help that we can meet that need. No one wants to see that there are 2,000, 2,500, 2,800 families visiting a food pantry every month, just one of the food pantries in town, and recognizing that looks like it's going to continue for the foreseeable future. But thanks to the generosity of donors like you, we're able to continue to meet that need and not have to put really strong limits on how often people have the availability to come to the pantry. We do ask them to come not more often than twice a month, and we don't turn people away. I think that's important to understand. The gifts of people in the community allow us to buy more food. They also allow us to buy personal care items, which are an important piece of the dignity of each person. So that's things like diapers and toilet paper and laundry detergent and toiletries. These things allow people to live their lives in a manner that's dignified. So thank you for the support that you have made to help us continue to meet these needs that are so far beyond what we expected when we did that budget last June. Chris, what's going on right now? How do people actually get food from our food pantry?
Yeah, so right now we're still operating curbside with a drive-through. So we've got volunteers checking in cars, loading food into cars. They're boxing food in back, bagging fresh produce and eggs and butter and those kinds of things into bags for the volunteers to load into cars. So right now, that's kind of the predominant way that people are getting food. On like Thursdays, we'll have lines that go all the way down Coleman Street and start wrapping back around before we open. So actually, one of the positions that we have is directing traffic. So that as you can imagine, with that many cars coming in, you really don't want somebody cutting in line on you. So we'll direct traffic. So some of the new ways that people have been getting food, I started really thinking about this as the kind of pandemic took off, but I was really interested at the time in online ordering, so people could order their food ahead of time and come pick it up. And the pandemic really offered a great time to try that out, as people's choice in the food that they were getting was really limited. We wanted to find a way to put food choice kind of back on the menu, so to speak. And so we work with a couple of volunteers who put together a Google form for us that is linked to on our website. And so folks can go in there and fill out the form, select the food from a few different categories that they would like to get, and choose a day to come pick that food up. So that was the first step, and we felt really great about that. And then another opportunity came along with a program through DoorDash called Project Dash, and they reached out to us about the program that they were starting to break down barriers a little bit further and try to get the folks that could order food but did not have a way necessarily to come pick it up. So to have food delivered directly to them. And so we started that like late last summer, early fall. And so on Wednesday, we spend most of the day getting those orders ready. We have filled as many as 70 DoorDash orders on a Thursday. We're running at about 50 to 60 right now. Um, and so we'll work to get those orders ready, actually starting sometimes earlier than Wednesday, depending on how many there are, and to get those carted up and ready on Thursday morning. And then the dashers will start arriving about 11:30 a.m., picking up people's orders and then delivering them to them. So that's been a really nice relationship. We That started as a free program, and at the start of the new year, it did become a pay program, but it's like $6 per like 60 pound. As you can see the carts of food there. Is about 60 pounds or so, and we pay $6 for each delivery. So that's a lot. That's a pretty reasonable sum and something that we can actually fundraise for. Um, so those are the main ways right now, and soon enough we'll hopefully be able to offer indoor shopping again very soon. Really, the bottom line is we talk about choice a lot, and when we had that shopping style inside the pantry where folks would go around and use their points to spend on food is one way of looking at choice. And it's do I want spaghetti and spaghetti sauce? Do I want green beans and corn? And that is choice. But what we're trying to do is really open up choice to mean, how do I get my food? What works best for me? The speed of the drive-through food pantry is just so much faster than the old shopping model of, getting here early, parking your car, standing in line for up to a half hour or more, getting in the building, waiting to be checked in, getting your number, and then going and waiting in the waiting room again for, depending on how long, for a volunteer to call you in to shop. So that on busy days could be an hour plus wait. We can get the longest lines of drive-through right now through in about 25 minutes. So that is very beneficial to some people. So being able to add the speed and the choice of food together, I think, is a real sweet spot for us, and something that we're really hoping to be able to continue and hopefully grow into the future.
Chris, thanks for that. And thanks for helping all of us understand a couple of important things. One, truly how nimble and flexible you and your team have been over the last 3 years, turning around to an outdoor pantry really on a dime within a day's notice, going from the shopping model to the outdoor delivery model, and learning on the fly how that was going to work, because there really was no choice at the beginning of the pandemic. We had to do what needed to be done, but then adding the option for online ordering, adding the option for delivery for folks who are facing transportation barriers. I'm just continued to be awed by the creativity and the flexibility that you and Jenny and Josh and Ashley and Zoe have brought to making sure that we continue to serve the people who need a food pantry with as much dignity as we can. I'd like you to share maybe a couple stories that really reflect what that means for the people in the community that we serve.
You bet. Thanks for that, Julie. So one of the things that earlier in the pandemic we had the chance to partner with a couple. Actually, it started as one of the dialysis clinics down on Fish Hatchery Road, the what they call the Capital Clinic, and the social worker at that clinic reached out to us, wanting to know if it was within our capability to provide food for the patients down at that clinic that were on dialysis 3 times a week, and especially during the pandemic, even if they had the ability to get to a grocery store, it just wasn't really safe for them to do that. And a lot of them, are in really rough shape physically. If you know anybody that's undergone dialysis or does undergo dialysis, you know the toll that their body is under. And so I was really, really excited, for the chance for that partnership. What I didn't know is what went into a renal diet. And so that was a learning curve for me. And so we ended up inviting not only their social worker, but their dietitians from down at that clinic as well. And they came up and we looked at a lot of the food that, we regularly have and really could pick out a nice list of items that made about a 10 to 12 pound package of food that we could then deliver down to that clinic once a month. So we started doing that. We started with about 50 bags of food to that clinic. And then shortly after that, their other clinic kind of got wind of that as well. And the Fitchburg Clinic, which is across Fish Hatchery Road on Index Road. And we started delivering 50 packages of food to them every month as well. So on the first Wednesday, we were delivering 100 packages of food down there. Until recently, last month, we actually went up to 120 because they started, it sounds like, running out of bags. So not everybody that wanted one was getting one. So we upped it to 120. So I've really enjoyed that partnership working with them. There are times that I've gone down there that either the nurse who works on the floor is immediately grabbing bags for patients that she knows want and need them, or there will be some of the patients themselves that are getting a bag and like looking through the bag and see what they have this month. So that's been really cool to experience. And another way that the online ordering and DoorDash has really one really great example of that is I was working with a social worker who had a refugee family that came from Central Africa, and they were having a really hard time getting the food that their family needs going to food pantries. They had a really specific diet that they were used to, and they just weren't really getting what they needed. And she reached out to me like, could we get dry beans? Can we get rice, which we generally have anyway? And a few other items. And if she filled out, the DoorDash um, order form for them, could we make that happen? And I said, absolutely. And so we've been about once a month having DoorDash deliver a 20-pound box of dried red beans and about 10 pounds of rice and a few fresh items and a few other things that they've put on their list that again, that met their diet, things they were used to eating. So you can imagine coming, from Africa to the U.S. and your diet is completely different. Not to mention the total cultural change is I can't imagine what that's like for folks. So at least we could help them kind of get food that would hopefully normalize their situation a little bit more. So yeah, those have been really a couple of exciting things that I think we've been able to do, just in the last 6 months to a year.
Those are impressive stories, Chris. Thanks for sharing. I think about a family coming from overseas and, the barriers that they face financially and, uh, just acclimating to a new culture and to find a place that would be so attentive to their dignity, to provide food that's healthy for them. Again, this is why this work warms my heart, to be able to work with people who make that kind of commitment. This has been hard work for the last 3 years, and there's a question about whether or not our staff and volunteers are fatigued. And I don't mean to speak for Chris, but sometimes yes. On a blizzard day and you're out there on roads or a driveway that's slick and the rain is coming down or the snow is coming down. It's hard work. And yet we have had these incredible staff members and volunteers who have been committed to making sure that people get food because they recognize people need food. Your commitment to making people get food as donors does the same thing and provides encouragement to our staff and volunteers to know that their work is supported by the giving of a generous community so that people aren't doing without. My gratitude for everybody involved in making this happen is truly beyond words. And things aren't changing, right, Chris? We know that in February, and many of you have probably heard, in February, benefits that people were getting during the pandemic so that they would have more food at home have ended. Will you talk a little bit about FoodShare and what that means?
Yeah, that's right, Julie. So during the pandemic, folks who were on FoodShare, eligible for FoodShare, were taken up to the maximum dollar amount of their household size. So, for instance, a single person who before the pandemic was on FoodShare, the minimum dollar amount, actually the maximum, no, the minimum dollar amount was $20 for those folks. So a lot of people, they were single and say on Social Security, they would get the minimum dollar amount, which was $20. They were, during the pandemic, taken to the maximum dollar amount for their household size. So again, for a single person, that was about $200. So all during the pandemic, people, were getting a lot more money through their FoodShare. And then in, Julie said February, then of February, the what was taking people up to that maximum dollar amount was called the extra or emergency allotment. And so people who were getting FoodShare would get what they had been getting pre-pandemic at their usual time. And then at usually about the third weekend of every month, they would get that extra allotment that would take them up to the maximum dollar amount for that household size. So people, were had still a little bit of a safety net, even though the child care tax credit had gone away. There was still FoodShare, and a dollar amount that was more appropriate to, for somebody to feed their family or themselves in the case of a single person. And so it went away at the end of February, and that's when our number really spiked in March to over 2,800 families. And again, as Julie mentioned, there's not a lot right now. As a matter of fact, there's not anything that leads us to believe there's going to be any change to that. As a matter of fact, I've read more recently of, they're wanting to be cuts in SNAP. Hopefully that does not happen. That usually comes up as some kind of bargaining tool, but, right now there's nothing coming down the pipeline that says this is going to get better. So I think this is kind of where we're at for now. And we expect that the numbers to still be very large as we, go through the spring, and just they usually actually get busier in the summer. So when kids are out of school. So we'll see how that goes. And the best we can do is prepare for the increased usage. I know Julia again had mentioned that last year our budgeting cycle came about really before we had a really good idea of what was going to happen. Now we have a really good indication of how things are and can better prepare for that. Yeah, it's probably going to be a bumpy ride yet.
Chris, we're starting to get a few questions, and we're really at the point where what we've prepared for you to share with you today is done. So I'd like to start getting into some of the questions. I hope what you've already heard here has been inspiring to you, and just feels like a reward to you for your generosity, that the kindness that you have offered is making a true impact for neighbors who need a place to get healthy food for themselves and their families. A couple things that have popped up that I'd like you to touch on, Chris. There's questions about DoorDash. So how far do they go? Is it done by volunteers, or do they get paid? And is this something that we can sustain?
So DoorDash, the delivery radius is 10 miles from here. So that gets us, I think, out to Verona. It is short of Sun Prairie. It'll go to the far east side, but not to Sun Prairie. So it gives us a really pretty good range of Dane County, but not all of it. So those are regular DoorDash drivers. They get paid by DoorDash, the same as they would for any delivery that they're making, which is one of the reasons I've actually kind of loved this relationship. Is it's not having volunteers doing it is great. Um, what is kind of cool about it, though, is people who actually have come here and like, what is this? Is this a food pantry? How can I get food? Are being paid actually to make deliveries for us. And that's kind of a win-win, really. When you have folks in need actually kind of being paid for the work that they're doing. So, and again, I mentioned it's about $6 a delivery. So, um, I believe that will be sustainable for us. Again, I think it's something considering the pluses of it. I think should be, something that would be pretty easy for us to fundraise for. And I just wanted to hit on one other question, Julie, which was, Chris, can you move back from your camera? And yes, I can. Thanks, Catherine.
So, quite a few questions coming about what comes next and how can the folks who have joined us today support that. Will you start with what it would take to come inside and a little bit about how volunteers support the effort of the food pantry, what their jobs look like, and how that changes, or if that changes when we do come back inside?
Yeah. So right now we're averaging about 160 families per pantry shift. So that back when we were inside doing, the shopping model, that was about what it was like the couple of days before Thanksgiving when it would be really, really, really busy. And we would prepare for extra volunteers and, hopefully be able to get that kind of crowd of people through the food pantry in a reasonable amount of time. We would still be here generally pretty late after the shift. Um, but we would be like, well, that's over. And now that's every day. So right now it's a little difficult to say, yeah, let's just move back indoors. What we are hoping to do is be able to actually, we've been working on adding another staff person so that we can open again on Saturdays and then hopefully spread out some of the need that we're seeing in the 4 weekdays that we're open, and then make that a little bit more doable, and still keep have a couple of indoor shopping days, a couple of drive-through days, and then have those online options and be able really to cover whatever choice it is that people would like to do to get their food.
And what do the volunteers actually do?
So right now the volunteers are they are bagging food in back as it comes in. The produce that we order, the produce and other stuff that we get through Trader Joe's and other vendors. Um, and they are packing boxes of dry goods. So through the drive-through right now, we're handing out about a 20-pound box of dry goods, about a 10-pound bag of meat that is getting bagged up, about around 10 pounds of produce with that comes with eggs, yogurt, cheese. We were getting butter for a long time, but we haven't really had butter for a little bit. And getting that stuff ready to go out that day. And then there are volunteers loading the cars as they drive through. We load those boxes onto a table first. A volunteer is doing that generally. Then volunteers are taking it off that table and putting it into cars. We also have volunteers that are checking cars in, just getting name and date of birth and address. So it's similar, really. The jobs are a little bit similar to what we were doing before. Outside of it's outside and you're loading it directly into the car instead of we're shopping first and then you're loading it into the car. But when we are able to come back inside, we envision that process will be a little bit different as well. I'd really like to, I think we envision there being more autonomy in people as they're shopping, less of the person with the clipboard following them around and keeping track of points, but kind of a more free range, with volunteers in strategic places to answer questions or help, the client as needed. There may be some people that still need one-on-one service, but that's kind of our goal for now, to try to change it up and just give people a little bit more freedom as they shop.
Thanks. We have a couple questions about who uses the pantry. What are the criteria? How do they get started? And can we serve people who who aren't documented?
Yes, we absolutely can, and we do a lot. We have a lot of undocumented folks that come through. They're not eligible for the programs that were put in place for folks during the pandemic. So yes, we see a lot. Generally, the guidelines are you need to be a Dane County resident, and you need to be below 200% of the federal poverty level. Those are the basics. We haven't right now during the drive-through been really strict at all about, it's all self-report anyway. So it's not like we're asking people to show their income, it's self-report. And I would say in all the years that I've been here, I've had maybe a couple of people during that time say, I think I might be above the income limit, and then we give them food anyway. So it's just, basically if somebody is coming here and presenting that they need food, we're going to help them get food.
Thanks, Chris. These are really good questions coming from our watchers, and I just want to take a moment and encourage you to keep those questions coming. If you haven't put yours in the chat box, we're happy to continue to answer questions. So, how about the non-food stuff? Why is that important? And is there a place for people to help in a particular way around making non-food items available to people in need?
Yeah, so we talked about FoodShare quite a bit, and so one of the things to realize about FoodShare is it is for food only. No personal care items, all those things that we all need. You cannot purchase toilet paper, you cannot purchase toothpaste or body wash, shampoo, any of those things. You cannot purchase with your SNAP benefits. So especially early in the pandemic, when we were accessing a lot of free food as the county really, Dane County really stepped up during the pandemic and got a substantial amount of money to Second Harvest to purchase food for Dane County food pantries. We had a while where where we weren't paying very much for food, if hardly at all. And so we were using our money at that time to purchase toilet paper, again, all those things I mentioned, toothpaste, body wash. So we would have really nice personal care bags for folks as they drove through. And now, as that has kind of dwindled and the the number of drive-through customers has increased, we're spending an incredible amount of money on food right now, to the point where I couldn't really order personal care stuff anymore, certainly not regularly. When anybody had asked about doing a drive, for instance, do you need a food drive? Early on in the food pantry, I'd said, or during the pandemic, I would say, please don't do a food drive for us because we have access to all of the food we need. Please do a personal care drive because those things, people we don't have as much access to, and if we do, we're paying for it. So that um, you know, was a huge benefit. And now we're back to spending money on food, but still we can meet that need. Um, but the personal care has kind of fallen away. So I would still encourage people if their church is doing a drive or they want to go pick something up for the food pantry, those personal care items are a huge need.
Chris, is this happening other places? Is it just St. Vincent de Paul's food pantry, or what else is happening around Dane County?
Yeah, it's everywhere in certainly in our community, and quite frankly, Madison is probably a lot better off than other communities. But the usage here has been way up, all over the place. One of the things that I found really beneficial, starting early on in the pandemic. A lot of the folks running larger food pantries got together, and we were doing a Zoom every month to really help each other get through this. Like, we were all changing, as in the moment, sometimes from we would, speak every month, and it would be like, I can't even remember what happened 3 weeks ago. And whatever we were doing 3 weeks ago is different now, has changed already. Um, so it just was really helpful to, um, in that sense, to really work together, support each other, um, and just do the best we could all do, to help folks in this community get what they needed. A lot of we had always served all of Dane County, but we were in every 30-day pantry. There were other pantries that um, only served a specific neighborhood or zip codes or whatever, that opened up their doors to anyone within Dane County. And we all kind of, really to ease the need on everybody, all kind of went to the same, like, anybody within Dane County can come to any of these food pantries, and come when you need to. And because the need has gotten, um, you know, really high, we have gone to a stricter every 2 weeks. Again, we're like working with people on that to get the word out, like, hey, if you can, please come every 2 weeks. So, but it's been a really successful collaboration, I think, among food pantries to get people what they need.
A question has popped up about food that we haven't talked about yet and a program that we haven't talked about at all. How does the Lacey Food Pantry Garden fit into all of this?
Sure. So I'm trying to recall how much, like, what the yearly um, harvest in pounds is from Lacey. I want to say it's around 20,000 pounds.
I think
Does
that's
that
about
sound
right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So we and that's beautiful fresh food straight from a garden, brought to our food pantry, right out to people the next day. Um, and you can't get, you could go to the farmer's market on Saturday and not get fresher food than we're getting from Lacey Garden and the other food pantry gardens that are producing for food pantries. It's really incredible what those volunteers do. I think about them a lot when it's so hot, like in the summer, when it's like weeding time. It's not like the fun planting or um, harvesting, it's the weeding, and it's July and it's like 90 degrees. Um, and so I really have internalized that to the point where I feel really attached to that food. Like, we have to do our best to make sure this goes out to people with no waste. Um, because I know the amount of work that goes into it. If any of y'all out there like have your own garden, I get attached to like my 3 pepper plants every year, right? And like I gotta make sure these go to somebody. So it's just a really wonderful thing that people are so generous with their time to make that happen.
One of the things that I think is really cool about the pantry garden is that it is entirely volunteer run. And so, people give up a couple hours on a Monday or a Thursday evening to go out and do the work that Chris was talking about, planting and weeding and harvesting, that brings so much fresh food to the pantry. I also had the privilege of sitting in on a planning meeting with some of the garden team that organizes the work, and their intentionality about growing food that people want is additionally remarkable. They look for food that is, that is popular, but they also address, you know, ethnic preferences and dietary needs, and what kind of plant, if you're growing green beans, which variety produces the most bang for the buck. There is so much intentionality about the process to get food to pantry users that is healthy and delicious and fresh. And I'm a terrible gardener. So I admire the work and the commitment that happens to bring 20,000 pounds of fresh produce to our pantry every summer. If you want to get involved in that, you can go on our website, and they're looking for garden volunteers to get started in the next month or so. If that's your thing, you can do it as an individual, you can do it as a small group, and if you love that kind of work and you like being out in the sunshine and fresh air, there's plenty of that work to do. Looks like Catherine put in the information for Chris and I that last year, where 20,000 pounds was a little bit high, it was between 12 and 13,000 pounds. I think they did a couple things new last year. They were doing some extra washing of the fruits and vegetables out there and bagging some of it up. So some of the work went in a little bit different direction, but that is a lot of fresh food. I think we have time for a couple more questions. And I think these are good questions as we're getting to the end of our time together. What motivates you and your team every day, and what's most meaningful to you in your work? And I'm going to let Chris go first, and then I want to answer that one too.
So I think like where we're at right now, what motivates me really is the opportunity to offer people options in how they choose to get their food. If people really like the time saving aspect of the drive through that we offer the drive through. If online ordering and delivery really works for some folks, that we can offer that. If there are folks that are really want to come back inside and like more look at the food that they are going to be taking home with them, that will be able to offer that. It really has been kind of amazing to uh, see people that the the original. So we the shopping method was really here's how we're doing this. And I think we found that food insecurity is not a one size fits all problem. So we are doing our best. And I think what motivates me is to try to meet all of those people that have different challenges, find the best way that works for them. And I think we found out early on in the in the pandemic of people driving through or walking up that had been on the bus that have uh, whether it be anxiety issues or all any number of things that really makes it difficult for them to be in a building or in a room waiting with other people that would agitate them, um, and to see them be able to come in and us give them food and then they drive away and they're like thank you. And it was like so refreshing to see us be able to meet other people's needs that had struggled in the one way that we were offering them to get food. So that's been really meaningful for me, and I think that that's what continues to motivate me really.
Thanks, Chris. I'll tell you what's meaningful and motivational for me. And I want to echo something Chris just said. It wasn't just this last Thanksgiving, I don't think. I think it was the year before that. And there was a long, long line in the food pantry. And so I was outside directing traffic. That long line is complicated here because we can't allow it to back up onto Fish Hatchery Road. So there's a whole process that makes this work. But when it's a long line, you need somebody there directing traffic. And it was my turn. And people are patient in the line, waiting their turn. They're helping other people figure out what's going on. And then as they go through this line, and it's a cold, snowy day, there's 5 or 6 people who, for 2 hours at a time, are loading boxes of food and bags of food and a turkey or a ham into people's cars. They're doing real heavy work, and I'm standing out there waving my arms and talking to people. And yet, as people are leaving car after car, they've gotten their food, they stop, they roll down their window, and they say thank you to me. I've done the least of anyone out there. And they're telling me thank you. And to see and understand that this makes people have a happy Thanksgiving was very eye-opening to me in the moment. And Chris and his team do that every day of the food pantry. They are so intentional about making people have a more comfortable life when they're struggling. You know, culture starts from the top. And when I stepped into my role here, I walked into an organization that has almost 100 years of history of working together to help neighbors in need. And I have watched Chris and the team that he has built follow his heart to do this work so well, with so much dignity, with so much honor, that it's just a pure joy to be part of it. His example has brought volunteers with this kind of commitment, and his example and the example of his team keeps people coming back to do this work. It's hard work, and yet here they are doing it and taking joy in it. And I stand back in so much admiration. I also look at what you have done, and I hear from folks not infrequently, does my 25 bucks make a difference? We're in a position, we are spending close to 3 times what we budgeted for food. And we're able to do that because 25 bucks from a lot of different people make a difference. 25 bucks can help us buy food for 3 or 4 families, because we can do that in a way that you can't do at the grocery store these days. But that amount helps people today. We have big donors who can do more than 25 bucks, but that broad base of support from across our community means we've been able to meet this need that we don't see changing anytime soon. And so I'm grateful for you and your part in that, and grateful that you'd take the time to be with us here today. I have a couple action items for you before we say goodbye. First of all, there have been quite a few questions that have continued to pop up in the chat today about volunteering. If you want to become a volunteer, Zoe Lavender is our volunteer coordinator, and she will be happy to help you figure out how you might check in. She can work around work schedules and other commitments, and you can make a short-term or a long-term commitment. We look to make it as easy as possible for people to volunteer. And Chris will tell you, once you're in the door, it's hard to leave because of what happens here and what it's such a joy to be a part of. You will get Zoe's contact information in an email after we're done here today. I also would ask you to fill out a survey to tell us whether this was worth your time today, and whether there are other things that you might be interested in learning about. We'll be making a decision about when we might do something like this again, and we'd really like to honor what it is that you have to tell us. So if you take a few minutes to fill out that survey, again, that will come in an email when we're done today. And the last one is, we've got our Care Cafe coming up next month. It'll be the first one that we've had in person since 2019, and we're really, really excited to be back together at the Alliance Center. It's May 24th from 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning. And if you want to come hear more about the exciting work that we're doing and what we're envisioning for the future, I hope you'll join us, and that you'll invite a friend to come. We want to make this a big, exciting, fun event for all of us. So there will be a link in that same email if you'd like to register for the Care Cafe, and I hope you'll do that soon. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for your generous support in, whether that's financial support, volunteer support, or for a number of you, both of those things. We're grateful for all you do and all that you help us to do. I just wish you blessings for the rest of your day.